Bibliophiles of the internet, my name's Adriana, and today I'm here to bring you my February wrap-up. As you may know, February is Black History Month here in the US, and so I made a point to center Black narratives as written by Black authors throughout the month, with only a couple of exceptions, which we'll discuss. The first book I listened to was Dear Martin by Nick Stone, read by Dion Graham. This is Own Voices YA about a young Black high school student named Justice who goes to a private school, is bound for the Ivy League, and he's at the top of his class. But none of that matters when he's trying to help his drunk ex-girlfriend get home safely, and because of how it looks, he ends up in handcuffs. After that, it's hard for him to go back to blissful ignorance when it comes to injustice and systematic racism, and try as he might to stay on the right path, things are only getting worse and worse. I enjoyed how real this story is, and that you see this character who has everything before him, who has a great future ahead of him, and he is in constant fear of it being taken away at any moment. The raw anger, frustration, and confusion is palpable. You really feel Justice going through it. How can the world expect this teenage boy to make peace with the fact that his life will always be valued as less, his accomplishments will always be seen as less, his worth will always be understood as less? That's not exactly something you can come to terms with. There's so much inner turmoil Justice is working through because he esteems Dr. King as the ultimate icon of peace and resistance, but everything he's going through makes it very difficult to channel peace. The story asks, is it possible to promote resistance and peace at the same time in this day and age, or has the time for respectability politics passed? The story does a great job of showing that it's easy to fold to all the crap life hands you. It's easy to decide that every effort is futile, but ultimately the only person you control is you, and you have to take ownership over your future and your actions. Now, I wasn't as in love with some craft elements in the book. Like, there were a lot of scenes that were purely dialogue, where it would have the speaker, a colon, and whatever they said. No narration, no dialogue tags. I get it, but it just felt somewhat awkward for the narrator to read, and definitely awkward to listen to, especially with the audiobook. And while a lot of the commentary was on point, especially in the beginning, a lot of it felt inorganic or forced because a majority of that commentary was literally happening in a debate class. And there you'd have those asshat white kids, ignorant of their own privilege, just spouting nonsense, and then the rest of the class correcting those individuals. It was good, and it was necessary, but the device just made it feel a bit inauthentic. Overall, when I take into account the success of the concepts and themes versus the success of the craft elements, I feel like this one ends up with a solid 3.5 stars. Then I listened to Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, read by the author himself. This is again Own Voices. As the author says, it's very much like A Christmas Carol meets Boys in the Hood. It's about 15-year-old Will, whose brother has just been shot and killed in an act of gang violence. The very next morning, Will grabs his brother's gun and gets on the elevator to go get revenge on the person he believes is to blame. However, time is not working the way it usually does as he makes his way down, and for every floor he reaches, a ghost from his past boards the elevator and gives Will a piece to a bigger story than the one he thinks he knows. First of all, this story is written in verse, and it was one of the only times where I felt it was both necessary and successfully done. I mean, the entire ordeal of living through a shooting, losing a sibling, grieving, being furious at the people and the systems responsible is an incredibly heightened experience. Poetry captures that frantic, desperate energy and gives it form, shape, and purpose. This is also a situation where the character is not necessarily thinking every little thing through, so having traditional narration where every detail comes up just wouldn't make sense. And of course, Jason Reynolds writes and speaks with such conviction and power that the whole reading experience really came to life. But a bigger part of why I appreciate this story is because it's not a morality tale. It doesn't presume to know or pass judgment. The spirits boarding this elevator aren't there to ask Will if he's sure about what he's doing. They aren't there to say they made the same choice and now they regret it. They're not there to talk him down or convince him that they know what the right thing is. They're just like, hey, if you're gonna do this, make sure you have all the information, make sure you know the story, make sure you know what's at stake. It's not this story that was written so you can be like, oh man, I read this book by Jason Reynolds and I learned that gang violence is wrong. No. If anything, it's about being trapped in cycles of violence, how legacies of murder are continued, and how people who live that are just trying to follow the rules and examples set down by others so they might survive. Right and wrong rarely even come into the equation, and the story's not about that. This was a really fantastic audiobook, and I gave it 4 stars. Then randomly, I finally decided to read The Privilege of the Sword by Ellen Kushner. This is a companion/sequel of sorts to Sword's Point, which I read and loved back in 2015. It's an Own Voices queer fantasy of manners about a young girl named Catherine who's always imagined herself going to the city, attending glamorous balls, and making herself known in society so that she can secure a passionate yet fortunate marriage. What actually ends up up happening is that her wealthy yet outlandish uncle Alec offers to pay off her family's debts if they will send him Catherine in exchange and allow him to have her trained in the art of swordplay, which, you know, is not a thing that women do. I just love the entire fantasy world of Riverside where the story is set, because you have all these quirky, sharp-tongued characters who are trying to put in motion their own plans, but who also get tangled up in politics, so they often have to go about their business in creative ways. Of course, because it's a fantasy of manners, there's a sense of propriety, this established idea of what is proper, what is right, who's at the top, who's at the bottom, and yet the characters in these stories show a complete disregard for all of that. Just by existing, they're going to disrupt what is accepted. I love that Catherine, a bisexual girl coming into her own, is allowed to exist in this unique position where she doesn't have to choose between being masculine over being feminine. She is allowed to be both. She loves wearing dresses, reading romances, going to plays. She also comes to enjoy the practicality of wearing trousers, finds that she has an affinity for the sword, and she enjoys that it's a show of power and a way for her to mete out justice. Swordsmen are highly revered in Riverside, and they're often used as a means to sort out political and social issues, and Catherine is again in that unique position where she can regain the honor of disrespected women if she so chooses. She can champion the ignored and unfortunate. But learning swordplay also gives her the opportunity to explore herself and her own identity. If she had never opened herself up to another path, she might not have realized who she really was. Because she dresses like a man, because she has a say in where she goes and what she does, she's able to freely look upon and maybe even court women and men alike. I really enjoyed that aspect of freedom and how Catherine uses that freedom to take a stand for what she wants and what she cares about above what anyone else wants. I'm so glad I finally read this one, and I gave it 4 stars. After that, I read Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. I actually just posted a spoiler-free recommendation/review video for this one, which I will link down below, in which I give you 5 good reasons as to why you should read this amazing book. It's a fun, thoughtful, incredibly sweet romance with fantastic asexual representation, so go check out that video and then go read it. For the record, I gave this one 5 stars. Then, because I was between Audible credits, I decided to look and see what I already had on my device. So on a whim, I decided to reread, or I guess re-listen to, I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson, read by Julia Whalen and Jesse Bernstein. This is an incredible YA book that does qualify as queer lit because it's told in dual perspectives, and one of those perspectives belongs to a character who identifies as gay. This stunning story is told from 2 different points of view from 2 different points in time. The main characters are a set of fraternal twins, Noah and Jude, who are both extremely artistic, and they've had an ugly falling out ever since their mother passed away. Noah is narrating the events of what happened from the past, while Jude is narrating the present, and eventually the 2 narratives catch up to one another and meet. I have always loved the writing in this book. The stylistic choices involve so much risk because sometimes Nelson's use of language is outlandish or bizarre, but she really has that ability to take the familiar and shape it into something new. It's a kind of magic. She also brings to life that thrill of discovering something new about the world or yourself, while also painting that discovery as a double-edged sword, because you might discover things you can't take back. There's also such great tension in these characters because they're both terrified to be seen, but they also need to be seen for different reasons. For Jude, it's the fact that she's so unbearably sad. She's depressed. She's terrified that people are going to figure out that she's just fallen apart ever since her mother died. She's convinced people are going to see her as weird or worthless, and she figures it's safer to hide herself. But at the same time, she needs someone to reach out and tell her it's okay to not be okay. And then Noah is also very sad, but he's terrified that people are going to realize that he's gay when he already doesn't fit in and doesn't really have a place. On the one hand, it would be terrible if people found out and used that against him, but on the other hand, it would be incredible to be fully seen and understood. So both of these characters are balancing between what if people figure it out, but what if no one ever figures it out? Where does that leave us? This was an extremely visceral listening experience that made me feel so many things, and for the 2nd time in a row, I gave this book 5 stars. Then my Audible credit came in, and I was finally able to listen to the book I planned to read, which was Sing Unburied Sing by Jessamine Ward, read by Rutina Wesley, Kelvin Harrison Jr., and Chris Chalk. This is an Own Voices contemporary story about a boy named Jojo who pretty much takes care of his toddler sister Michaela on his own, while his mother Leonie deals with her drug use, and she abuses drugs because she can only see her dead brother brother when she's high. Her boyfriend, Jojo's father, Michael, is being released from prison, and together all of them embark on the world's worst road trip to go pick him up, and Jojo might just bring back a ghost of his own. I love the way Jessamine Ward's writing just cuts to the quick to uncover the vital essence of these characters. There was this one unforgettable line about Leonie's laugh being like red clay where grass won't grow, and characterizations like that speak volumes. There's a great focus on these characters, Jojo especially, trying to parse their place in the world and their understanding of the world through the stories of others. Jojo often begs his grandfather to tell him stories of his youth, and he's also constantly trying to piece together his mother's history, his family's history, to try and understand how they got to this place. The story also speaks to trying to navigate what other people want and need while still trying to figure out and prioritize what you want. You see this especially with Leonie's perspective, because she doesn't really have that mothering instinct. She doesn't know how to stop her own desires and needs from blocking out the needs of her children. Her life comes first. And that's paralleled against Jojo's reality, where he's responsible for his sister's well-being whether he likes it or not, and he's trying to balance caretaking with everything else. I think the story also comments on how the legacy of Black suffering adapts itself and continues on, and it should go without saying, but this is obviously a legacy they have not created or upheld for themselves. While slavery is still very much an open wound, where grandparents might have once told their grandkids about how they were enslaved on a plantation, now that's become removed by a generation or two, and the new stories are going to be about systematic imprisonment and being abused within the prison system. His grandfather's stories about his time in prison and the fact that his own father is coming from prison helps frame Jojo's understanding of the world, and he carries the weight of those stories with him at all times. This was an evocative, immersive story, a great listen, and I gave it 4.5 stars. If we're talking about great works by Black authors, no Black History Month TBR would be complete without N.K. Jemisin, which is why I picked up The Broken Kingdoms next. I did switch between reading the physical book and listening to the audiobook for this one, which is read by Cassandra Freeman. This is the second book in the Inheritance trilogy, and it follows a blind artist named Ori Shoth who has the ability to quote-unquote see magic. One day she takes in this homeless stranger who is full of magic, and around the same time it's discovered that someone in her city is murdering godlings. Her mysterious guest seems to be connected somehow to all this bloodshed, and suddenly Ori is thrust into this conspiracy and her life might be compromised as well. I think I enjoyed the plot of the first book slightly more than this one, but thematically speaking, this story delivers. Here Jemisin weaves an incredible tale of a woman grabbing hold of her own agency and holding on for dear life. Especially because Ori is blind, she's used to people taking her for granted or taking it upon themselves to decide what's best for her, but in this story, she's standing up to people, she's standing up to gods, and firmly saying that good or bad, she can make her own damn choices. She fully owns her identity, her abilities, her sexuality, her personhood, and that is powerfully heady stuff. There's also a really powerful parallel between the gods' abilities to hurt and destroy and Ori's own ability to create. If she believes in something, she can make it real, and by using that she's able to combat and even disrupt the gods' plans. Another thing I noticed was that the story speaks to how common it is for the labor and existence of Black women to be commodified and weaponized. There's so many instances where something Ori has created or generated is used as a weapon against her will, and she's trying to do whatever she can to regain that control and make her will rise above anyone else's. It's more of a slow-burning story, which I do enjoy, but I also found the ending to be a little bit abrupt and underwhelming, so ultimately I gave this one 4.5 stars. And finally, my poetry collection for February was The Big Book of Exit Strategies by Jamal May. I would say this collection takes a very real approach to uncovering the dark, tangled depths of the American condition and subsequently the human condition. The collection incorporates a balance of dark humor and wonder to spotlight modern urban identity, growing pains, and a loss of innocence. It's interesting to think about how this collection opens with a piece that says, "What matters is not that I'm broken, but that I'm growing," and then the speaker shifts into focusing on all the ways they've been broken in life. And over the course of this collection, you kind of realize that it doesn't have to be one or the other. Breaking and growing are symbiotic experiences. Jamal May also demonstrates a great mastery of language as he plays on words to uncover experiences that are both dark and wholly human, and there's a great battle of parallel tensions in every piece. Every page you feel something building and building towards a breaking point until you get to the end of the poem and it's like a breath has been released. Even if there's no concrete resolution, even if the poem hasn't reached a place of understanding, you feel that tension dissipate, which creates a feeling of satisfaction and resonance. Even though I didn't fully understand every little poem, this collection still made me feel something and see something, so I gave it 4.5 stars. So those are all the books I read in the month of February. If you have read any of these books, let me know what you think of them in the comments, or let me know what you plan to read for the rest of March. But that is everything I have for this wrap up today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!